Now, what are they distracting us from? Because they're going to milk this, they're going to continue this going, and the government's going to love it. You know why?
Why is that?
Because they're distracting us from a ton of other stuff they don't want us to know about.
Like what?
Let's stay in the military. Veteran suicides. Absolute disaster. What's being done? Nothing. Nothing effective. An officer fights and dies with his men. And the moment he doesn't do that, he's forfeited his right to be saluted, he's forfeited his right to be called sir, and he's certainly forfeited his right to get a Distinguished Service Cross, Angus. So how about you hand that in and lead from the front by example?
Angus was in command at the time.
2011 to 2012, Joint Task Group 633, Operation Slipper.
I'm sorry, that is absolute shit from him. I can't believe he's trying to pull this crap. That's insane.
It's not the cock up. And look, for every young officer out there that thinks I'm sort of Beelzebub and besmirching the military, it's not the cock up, it's the cover up. Remember that, folks. It's not the cock up, it's the cover up. You cock up, I did it, ready to resign. An entire career because of phone calls, because somebody had dramas back home. Should I have fixed it differently? Maybe. But that's what you do. That's how you lead from the front by example, not from the rear by direction. Okay, that's that. Let me just jump on very quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Now, what are they distracting us from? Because they're going to milk this, they're going to continue this going, and the government's going to love it. You know why?
Why is that?
Because they're distracting us from a ton of other stuff they don't want us to know about.
Like what?
Let's stay in the military. Veteran suicides. Absolute disaster. What's being done? Nothing. Nothing effective. Because there's this whole joke, and the guys know it. There are those that are too crazy. Those aren't crazy enough, and the ones that get help are the ones in the middle who are just crazy enough.
Yeah.
And the really crazy one get pumped full of drugs by the psychiatrists, and the others just get left to hang themselves because they've had enough. So veteran suicides. What else are they distracting us from? Because this is the old magician's trick. It's misdirection. Watch my right hand, but don't look at what my left's doing. And that's what they're doing. And the government always hangs on to newsworthy articles to distract. What else we got? Oh, we got the pedophile issue I mentioned earlier. Mandatory vaccinations. There you go. They're not talking about mandatory vaccinations. It's not mandatory, said Scott Morrison. Really? Really? We'll talk about that shortly.
Yeah, we will. Absolutely.
We'll be talking about mandatory vax, because it's not mandatory, but if you don't have it, you're in trouble. What else are they covering up? Oh, the Defence Enhancement Bill that's now being referred for investigation, where foreign military and foreign police can come into Australia and be immune from prosecution. And as we discussed previously, good old Craig Kelly let the cat out of the bag, because the bill just talks about Defence Force aid to the civil community, which is fire, drought, flood. But he said it's about Defence Force aid to the civil power, which is the application of lethal force. And I can tell you what, I don't want anybody applying any foreigner applying lethal force in Australia.
Go to episode 7, guys. We go through it in episode 7.
What else? Countless other issues they don't want you to pay attention to, simply because it's uncomfortable for them. But there's plenty there, folks. There really are.
I mean, the religious freedom thing's completely been thrown under the carpet right now. You know, they're making headway, but it's not as big an issue as before 2020. I mean, there's a bunch of things that need to be solved, guys, that haven't been solved. I mean, did we all forget the start of the year, the farmers were in trouble? Did we all forget there was a drought? Did we all forget about the bushfires, that there was all this arson?
And no resolution. And here's why. And let me just go through this with you. I've mentioned this before. The new International Economic Order, Implications for Australia. Report from the Senate Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and Defence, February 1980. Now let me read one line. I've told you about this before. This is the information that was going to destroy Australia, our sovereignty, our manufacturing, our primary production, everything. So let me read you one line, and you can get this online on Trove. This inquiry made it obvious that there is limited knowledge of the new international economic order issues throughout the community. The public perception of what the new international economic order means generally and to Australians specifically should be promoted not only by the government and its instrumentalities, but by the media, unions, organisations, academic bodies and informed individuals. Promoted. It has to be promoted. They have to lie to us. So all these other issues they're distracting us from. Okay, more evidence. You've heard me talk about W. Cleon Skousen wrote The Naked Communist. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't Googled the 45 Goals of Communism, please do. Now, he wrote a follow-up book. That's called The Naked capitalist. And it's, in fact, it's a review of a commentary by Dr. Carol Quigley, who wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope. Now, Quigley is a self-confessed insider with the globalists, and he gives an illuminating history of the globalist agenda for this century, the entire century, who did what to whom and how. And let me just give you a couple of examples. Again, this has been going on since forever, and this is where you've been deceived. And again, I want to read it so we get it right. Let's talk about the Korean War. The Allies were not permitted to win the Korean War. They were actually prevented from winning. They could have won. In fact, South Korea was supposed to not exist. North Korea and China were supposed to win the entire peninsula. That was the globalist goal. And again, there's evidence there. And so we fought and died in Korea for what? Against their own people, their own leadership. Communist China and the nationalists. Chiang Kai-shek was a democratic Chinese leader who fought with the Americans during the war. And General Wiedemeyer, who was the American liaison and commander of, over there, had a good relationship with Chiang Kai-shek. And Chiang Kai-shek, after the war, was going to establish a democratic China. Think about that for a minute. And Wiedemeyer wrote to General Marshall, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time, and Marshall said, no, you don't. You have to let Mao Zedong's communists into Chiang Kai-shek's democratic government. Well, Wiedemeyer said that's ridiculous because you're going to hand over 500 million Chinese to the Communist Party. Well, Wiedemeyer was muzzled, and Chiang Kai-shek was disarmed by George Marshall, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The United States globalists gave China to Mao Zedong. Physically handed it to him. Why? Because they needed China. China is a creation of the globalists. More evidence? Henry Ford provided engines for the Wehrmacht. How we feeling uncomfortable now, are we? The globalists supporting Adolf Hitler's war machine. There's a book written by an American brigadier called War is a Racket, because that's all it is. And they send good men and women off to die for their globalist causes. They're never allowed to win the fight because there's another agenda.
Does it all come back to money, though?
Absolutely. Money and power.
Money and
power. But it's the power, because once you get enough money, you want power.
Yeah, because I mean, in the situation, and I contrast this with Russia and China. Russia and the Americans, they had a good relationship going. You know, one side would make money from selling arms, and the other side would also make money from selling arms.
They need two sides.
And then they'd go home, and then they'll drink and enjoy their family time with their own scotches or whatever. But with China wants to consume everything.
China, and the book actually makes the point. Quigley actually laughs in his book, Tragedy and Hope. He actually laughs at the good, decent people who are fighting, because he says you're aiming too low if you're hitting the communists. The communists are just the tools of the people that actually run the planet. And there's a ton of evidence. It's just there. They're just the tools, but the communists, they're just delivering for what the globalists want. Now, what's this got to do with Afghan report and distractions? This is how far back this goes.
It's a big leap. I mean,
it's a big leap, and that's why I held the book up. Read it. There's so much to catch up on, folks. You've got no idea. Americans are losing control of their destiny, and it's basically politicians meddling in what's going on. For example, and they gives a series of examples, and let me tell you how they turned a problem into a worse situation. Racial minorities. Right, the problem in the United States. And the idea was to expose these minorities to greater opportunities. So what did Washington do? By its actual laws, promoted into explosive tinderbox for another civil war, which is reaching its climax now. We've had these racial wars for decades in the US, actively promoted by politicians in Washington, and the same's happening here. Yeah. Rising crime rates. Social schemes and grossly permissive judicial decisions multiplied the crime rate. So there's a problem, here's the solution, and the solution makes the problem worse. Educational opportunity for our children needs to be improved. And again, money and policies that seriously discredited and collapsed public schools, the actual effect of politicians' decisions. So they're not just incompetent, lazy and corrupt. There's been this intentional strategy to destroy the country. The problem of moral decay, and something have to do about it. So what did they do? Sex education and so-called sensitivity training, which exploded the problem into a contagion of totally permissive decadence and moral degeneracy. They had the problem of pornography and obscenity. So what did they do? Washington smashed what little legal protection existed and created a flood of filth into the otherwise normally straight country. And it just goes on and on and on. And so this stuff, if it's happening in the US, it's happening here, and we can see it. And how do they do it? Last one. and I'm sorry if I belabor this point, but this is critical. You've been brainwashed. People believe that they have their opinions based on their own careful, rational analysis of the facts. Well, they haven't had facts for decades. And bit by bit by bit, they've been brainwashed. And they actually believe now that they are responsible for their own decisions. And we've spoken about the movies, we've spoken about the media, we've spoken about the politicians, we've spoken about judicial decisions that all shape us. And that's it, we've been brainwashed. And these are all books. There are dozens and dozens of these books that explain what's been going on and what I've been alluding to now for some couple of years, publicly at least.
Yeah,
it's all here. And once you see what they're up to and how they're doing it, it's disgusting. It really is. And that's what we're overcoming. And that's why I said A1's objective is decades in the execution.
Yeah.
Anyway, so every time you see a politician talk about something on TV and you see it's got legs, the story continues and lasts more than 2.5 minutes, it's because somebody wants it to continue, and it guarantee there's an agenda behind it because there's something they don't want you to see.
Yeah. It's very fascinating. I think a lot of people would get overwhelmed listening to this and it'd break their mind. Because a lot of this stuff is explained by, just normal corruption on an individual basis. The person's just trying to make money for themselves, for their family. And that is true to an extent, but there is, people discount that. People discount the global stuff that's happening and the bigger cabal scheme that's going on. And they think it's too much of a individual sort of.
You wanted to know, would you like to know what the world thinks of Australia? Okay. Australia is to the world what Adelaide is to Australia. We're an embarrassing, irrelevant, we're just silly and focused on nonsense. We're such an irrelevance. The people are anyway, the land, they want the land and the resources, they want to control that.
Yeah.
But the people of Australia, they think you're stupid and cowardly, the average punter. And they're about to discover that the average, while the elites are, they're stupid and cowardly without a doubt. But they're going to find out the Australian people are anything but.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think people around the world, they forget that it was Australia that delivered Jerusalem into the hands of the Brits. 60,000 Brits couldn't deliver it in quite a few hours. Yet the Australian light horsemen, 800 of them, delivered the Beersheba, which was the gateway to Jerusalem. And it actually ended up freeing Lebanon as well, not just the whole of Israel, which is the whole reason I'm here, guys.